The main thing, and this is not something you have to do, but it's something you can do. The main thing is to believe that there is a reason. There is a reason bad things happen. If you can do that, you don't need this show. You're already in pretty good shape. However, it's nice to hear some specific. It's nice to have it not be so amorphous. Like we want to know specifics. Why are bad things allowed to happen? And Swedenborg just goes ahead and gives you reasons. And we're going to give you reasons, and it's going to be quick in succession. We're not going to justify them too much, but we're going to touch on Swedenborg's answers to some of these big questions. And if you want to read it in more detail, you can download. We'll give the numbers will be here. It's all in Divine Providence. Let's go to a split screen, shall we? This kind of stuff needs a split screen. Why are evil people allowed to be successful? That's our first question, because you would think in a fair world, in a just world, if you were nice and you were honest and you were fair, you would end up rich and happy, and your family would be nice to you and society would be good to you. And if you were conniving and evil, you'd end up poor and destitute. But it's actually often the reverse. So why does that happen? Swedenborg says these reasons. To experience that worldly success doesn't bring happiness. Sometimes people who are evil have to go live out the fantasy for their sake of their own spirits. They get to go and they get to see, this is not what I thought it is. Otherwise, they are going to be so stuck with that desire they could never get out of it spiritually. So you don't think about it, but it's actually sometimes for their own good. Also, second one, people driven by selfish motives can accomplish useful services for the sake of reputation. Swedenborg actually says that people who are in love with their own ego and image can do more good for society often than actually people who love the human race, love the common good, because they're so obsessed with their reputation. You think about a corrupt sort of politician or one who just wants votes, but he knows, the voters want this, they want that, so gets up early in the morning, works really hard because it wants to win that admiration, that esteem, that people can actually be motivated by that in this frantic way that good people can't. So God wants to accomplish things in providence, can use evil people as chess pieces, just like good people, to do good. And then finally, sometimes aggressive skills are needed to accomplish something that kind-hearted people don't feel the drive to do, particularly in things like war. There's a country that's full of people that's going to get slaughtered unless it is defended. You sometimes need ruthless people to, not that those people are doing it for good motives, but God is pulling the strings on them, so he's turning their evil into good. But if I say that, you might say, well, why is war even allowed to happen in the first place? Isn't that a huge question everybody has? If there's God and there's love and there's providence, why do we have these wars? And Swedenborg says there are reasons, and these are them. One, the desire for control and possessions can't be kept in chains while still maintaining general human freedom. There is this darkness in the human heart, and you just can't lock it away without destroying the minds of people. It's got to come out. Two, unless evils can surface, we can't see them and be induced to resist them. And isn't this the way it is whenever some kind of terrible regime comes up? For instance, Beverly Brodsky mentioned the Holocaust. Don't we always, when something's going bad now, point to, well, look at the Nazis. We don't want to be like them. The human race looks at these tragedies and it reforms based on them. On an individual level, if we feel ourselves having a tendency towards something, or we make some mistake, we get a DUI, something like that, doesn't that make us realize, I've got a problem, and it's got to happen on a larger scale too? And in that same vein, evils suppressed by providence would stay closed in and would spread and devour everything like cancer. Swedenborg is looking at things, and he says that we should be from a spiritual perspective, meaning we're on this earth for a short period of time. We all have happiness and unhappiness at times, but it's going to be over. And then we're in this spiritual state, which Swedenborg says is eternal. So the things that are harmful to the soul have to take priority. And if there wasn't this getting this evil out in the open, let people go to war with each other who want to go to war, that would never be seen. It could never be removed. And the people with those impulses would never be able to be free to them. They would be destroyed. Also, the Lord can't rescue us from hell unless we see that we're in hell and want to be rescued. We have to, war is hell, that saying. We have to see, no, actually, this power is not what we want. It's not worth the bloodshed that we go through. Finally, to get a little bit weirder on you, earthly wars are a result of spiritual world conflicts. Swedenborg says the two worlds are intimately connected. So actually, things that are going on in heaven and hell, affect us and push us into things. So it's part of a larger system. Then permissions of personal choice also applies on a large scale, like groups choosing to go to war. If we said there's individual free will, we spent a whole section just like whining to you about how important that is. It's got to be, if all those free wills get together and say, we want to have war, there can't be this, okay, well, you're always stopped, because then there's not actually the ability to be in that moment of should we do it or not and choose to not. I mean, that's always what you want, but there's going to be this tipping point. And then finally, who seems to win in a conflict on earth doesn't in some ways matter. There are spiritual issues at play. The worldly and spiritual issues are united by a connection between things past and things to come, known only to the Lord, which that whole last point is essentially there's a bigger picture that we don't understand. Okay? We said we'd be brief. Let's get on to the real one. In general, why is evil allowed to exist? Why do we have evil? What does Swedenborg say about such things? Ever since the fall of humanity, which is not a literal Adam and Eve, we did a show about that, but this is ever since the human mind and heart began to be apathetic, not care about each other, want to harm each other, take stuff, we're born into a state of being involved in evil. We need to be led away from it in order to be reformed. Evils can't be set aside unless they come to light. You have stuff within you. Evils and goodnesses, tendencies, they're not just sort of ephemeral things. Spiritually, these are objects. This is the way your spirit is organized. If there's negative stuff in there, it's got to come out, and you can't purge yourself of something you don't know or you won't admit that you have. Evils have to come almost to action. We have to feel the reality of an evil inclination in order to be purged of it. There is if everyone would just not choose evil in the moment of wanting it, we could all live without it. But you have to be able to get to that point and actually have that vibrant freedom of I could do a bad thing or I could not, and then you make your choice. So we have to get to that point. Nobody has to commit the evil, but you have to get to that point. Also, evils acted out have to reach a certain climax before the built-in consequences begin to affect. This is a very karma-esque thing that Swedenborg describes. Evil carries its own punishment with it. Swedenborg describes in the spiritual world whole groups of people bent on evil. Once they reach a certain boiling point or they've done something particularly bad, then everybody's shaken up, taken off, restrained, made so they can't harm people anymore. The punishment comes on them, but it's got to get to this point. And you sort of see that with people, that if you always sort of looked at something you could do that's bad from afar, sometimes you have to jump into that lifestyle, suffer the consequences, hit bottom, and then you can start to be reformed from it. Letting us realize our evils allows them to be displaced by what is good and right. That follows. When we're being reformed, goodness and evil are brought face to face in a temptation which acts to purify us. And finally, I love this last one. Sometimes lesser evils are allowed to prevent greater ones. Then you may not feel like you love that, but it's an interesting concept that there are these things in us that, think about a person who their life could really start to go out of balance, but they have something they're sort of obsessed with, some kind of whatever it is, and that keeps them a little bit grounded. It kind of is a more organized outlet. I'm being vague because I don't want to upset anyone by listing something as a particular evil, but that as a more organized outlet for their negative tendencies than what they could be doing.